The thunder of hooves echoed through the valley as Willow Foster raced her bay mare across the open range, the scorching Montana sun beating down on her back. It was 1878, and the West was still wild, untamed, and dangerous for a woman alone. But Willow had never been one to shy away from danger, especially when her family's future hung in the balance. Her father's cattle ranch had fallen on hard times after his unexpected death 3 months ago. At 22, Willow had taken over, determined to save what remained of their once thriving operation. But someone was rustling their cattle, and tonight she was going to catch them in the act. As she approached the old barn at the edge of their property, Willow slowed her horse. Dusk was settling over the land, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. She dismounted quietly, tethering her mare to a post hidden from view. The rickety wooden structure loomed before her, and from inside, she could hear the low murmur of voices and the restless shifting of her cattle. Removing her father's Colt revolver from its holster, Willow approached the barn. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hand remained steady. She tracked the rustlers for weeks, following a trail of missing cattle and suspicious hoofprints. Now was her chance to end it. The barn door was ajar, a sliver of lantern light spilling onto the dirt. Willow peered through the gap. 3 men were inside, moving around her cattle, preparing to drive them away. Her jaw clenched as she recognized one of them, Emmett Walsh, a rival rancher who'd been trying to buy her land for a pittance. Taking a deep breath, Willow pushed the door open and stepped inside, her revolver raised. "That's far enough, Walsh," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "Step away from my cattle." The men froze, then slowly turned to face her, Emmett's face twisted into an ugly smile. "Well, if it ain't the Foster girl," he drawled. "Playing rancher all by yourself, ain't that sweet, boys?" His companions laughed, but their eyes were fixed on her gun. Willow kept it trained on Emmett's chest. "I'm not playing at anything," she said, "and those cattle have the Foster brand." "You're stealing from me and I won't stand for it." Emmett's smile faded. "You think you can stop us? One little girl against 3 men." He took a step toward her. "Your pa ain't here to protect you anymore." "I don't need protection," Willow replied, cocking the hammer of her revolver. "Now back away from my cattle before I put a hole in you." For a moment, tension crackled between them like lightning before a storm. Then Emmett nodded to one of his men, who suddenly lunged for her. Willow fired, the shot going wide as she was knocked to the ground. The revolver skittered across the dirt floor. Emmett loomed over her, his boot pressing against her throat. "Your land will be mine one way or another, girl. Tonight just makes it easier." Willow clawed at his boot, gasping for air. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. Then suddenly, the barn door crashed open. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the fading daylight, rifle raised. "Let her go," a deep voice commanded, "or the next breath you take will be your last." The pressure on Willow's throat eased as Emmett stepped back, hands raised slightly. She rolled to her side, coughing and gulping air into her burning lungs. The cowboy stepped further into the barn, his rifle unwavering. In the lantern light, Willow could now see him clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with dust from the trail coating his clothes. His face was partially hidden beneath the brim of his hat, but she caught the glint of determined eyes. "This ain't your business, stranger," Emmett said, trying to sound confident despite the rifle pointed at his chest. "You made it my business when you put your hands on a lady," the cowboy replied, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Now you and your friends are going to leave those cattle right where they are and ride out of here." "There's 3 of us and 1 of you," one of Emmett's men pointed out, hand hovering near his holster. The cowboy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Those are poor odds for you. I don't miss." Something in his tone made the men hesitate. Willow had regained her feet and retrieved her revolver, pointing it at the rustlers. "You heard him," she said. "Get out." Emmett's face contorted with rage, but he nodded to his men. "This ain't over, Foster," he spat as they backed toward the door. "You can't watch your cattle every night." "Neither can you watch your back," the cowboy replied evenly. "Remember that." When the sound of the rustlers' horses had faded into the distance, Willow lowered her gun and turned to the stranger. "Thank you," she said, rubbing her bruised throat, "but I had things under control." The cowboy raised an eyebrow as he lowered his rifle. Is that what you call it? Despite herself, Willow felt heat rise to her cheeks. I would have managed. I'm sure you would have eventually, he said, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I'm Adam Yates. Willow Foster, she replied, extending her hand. Adam took it, his grip firm but gentle. You own this spread? I do now. My father passed 3 months ago. She squared her shoulders, expecting the usual dismissal or pity that came when men learned she was running the ranch alone. Instead, Adam nodded. I'm sorry for your loss. He must have been a good man to raise a daughter brave enough to face down rustlers alone. The unexpected respect in his voice caught Willow off guard. He was, she said softly. Adam glanced at the cattle. You planning to drive these back tonight? I need to. They've wandered too far from the main herd. She hesitated, then added, I could use a hand if you're offering. I am, he said, his eyes meeting hers. As they worked together to drive the small herd back to the main pasture, Willow studied Adam Yates from beneath her lashes. He handled himself with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to the harsh realities of the frontier. His movements with the cattle were sure and practiced. What brings you to these parts, Mr. Yates? She asked as they rode side by side. Adam, he corrected. I'm heading to Silverdale. Heard they're looking for a new deputy marshal there. You're a lawman, he replied, his expression giving nothing away. Army before that. That explains the shooting, Willow remarked. Adam's mouth quirked up at one corner. What about you? Most women wouldn't be facing down rustlers alone. Most women haven't had to learn to survive out here the way I have, she said. My mother died when I was 12. It's been my father and me ever since, just me now. This ranch is all I have left of him, and I won't let anyone take it from me. Adam's gaze swept over her with newfound respect. Your father would be proud. They reached the main pasture as night fully descended. Willow's cabin stood nearby, a humble but sturdy structure her father had built with his own hands. Yellow lamplight spilled from the windows her ranch hand, Old Ben, must have lit them before retiring to the bunkhouse. You're welcome to stay the night, Willow offered as they secured the cattle. The bunkhouse has empty beds, and it's the least I can offer after your help. Adam nodded. Much obliged. I'll be on my way in the morning. But morning came, and Adam Yates didn't leave. Instead, he helped Willow mend fences, his strong hands working efficiently alongside hers. When she asked about Silverdale, he shrugged. The marshal position will wait another day, he said. One day turned into 2, then a week. Adam proved himself invaluable around the ranch, working from sunrise to sunset. Willow found herself watching him when he wasn't looking the way the muscles in his back moved beneath his shirt as he chopped wood, the gentleness in his hands when he tended to an injured calf. He was a mystery to her in many ways. Sometimes she would catch him staring into the distance, his eyes haunted by memories he wouldn't share. But he was also surprisingly easy to talk to, listening intently when she spoke of her dreams for the ranch, offering advice without trying to take control. Why are you still here? She finally asked him one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Adam was silent for a long moment, rolling a cigarette between his fingers without lighting it. Because something tells me you're going to need help when Walsh comes back, he finally said. And he will come back. Willow studied his profile in the fading light. Is that the only reason? His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the tension that had been building during their days working side by side. No, he admitted softly. Not the only reason. Before Willow could respond, the sound of approaching riders drew their attention. She stood, hand instinctively going to the revolver at her hip. Adam was already on his feet, rifle in hand. 3 riders emerged from the twilight, and Willow's stomach knotted with recognition. Emmett Walsh and his men had returned, just as Adam had predicted. Stay here, Adam said, moving to step off the porch. Willow caught his arm. This is my fight too. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded, and they walked together to meet the approaching riders. Walsh reined in his horse a few yards away, his gaze shifting from Willow to Adam and back again. I see you've hired yourself some protection, Foster, he sneered. Just a friend passing through, Adam replied easily, though his stance was anything but relaxed. What brings you back to Miss Foster's property? Business, Walsh said, dismounting. His men remained on their horses, hands near their holsters. I've come with an offer, Willow. The bank in town has called in your father's loan. You've got 1 month to pay it in full or they'll foreclose. Willow felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. My father had an agreement with Mr. Hollies. Hollies doesn't run the bank anymore, Walsh interrupted, smiling coldly. The new manager sees things differently, but I'm willing to buy your land now, save you the humiliation of foreclosure. $500, take it or leave it. $500 for land worth 10 times that amount. Willow's hands balled into fists. My father would rather see this ranch burn to the ground than have it fall into your hands, Walsh. My answer is no. Walsh's smile disappeared. Don't be a fool, girl. You can't run this place and you can't pay that loan. Your hired gun won't stick around forever. I think the lady gave you her answer, Adam said, his voice deceptively calm. Time for you to leave. Walsh's eyes narrowed. You don't want to make an enemy of me, stranger. Seems to me that ship has sailed, Adam replied. For a tense moment, Willow thought Walsh might draw his gun. Instead, he remounted his horse. 1 month, Willow, then this land is mine. As the riders disappeared into the gathering darkness, Willow's shoulders sagged. He's right about one thing, she said quietly. I can't pay that loan, not in a month. Adam turned to her, his face determined in the fading light. Then we have 1 month to find a way. The next morning, Willow rode into town with Adam beside her. The bank was a solid brick building on the main street of Prairie Junction, a town that had grown from a simple trading post to a bustling community as the railroad pushed westward. Inside, they were directed to the office of the new bank manager, Harrison Phillips, a thin man with spectacles and cold eyes. He confirmed Walsh's claim about the loan being called in. But why now? Willow asked, frustration evident in her voice. My father always made his payments on time. Business decisions, Miss Foster, Phillips replied, not meeting her eyes. The bank requires the full balance. Adam, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. And if the bank were to receive a substantial payment toward that balance, would that buy more time? Phillips hesitated. Perhaps. But it would need to be at least half the outstanding amount. Outside the bank, Willow paced the boardwalk. $800, she said, shaking her head. Even if I sold half my cattle, I couldn't raise that much in a month. Adam watched her, his expression thoughtful. What about the cattle drive to Cheyenne? When does that leave? In 3 days, Willow replied. But I wasn't planning to join it this year. I don't have enough hands to manage the herd. You have me, Adam said simply, and I can find more men. Willow stopped pacing. The drive takes nearly 3 weeks. If we can get my cattle to market in Cheyenne, the prices are good enough that I could pay off the entire loan. Adam nodded. Then that's what we'll do. For the next 3 days, they worked tirelessly. Adam recruited 4 experienced drovers from a nearby ranch whose owner owed him a favor. Willow selected the best of her herd for the drive, knowing it was a gamble that could either save or doom her ranch. The morning of their departure, Willow found Adam by the corral, checking the saddle on his horse. The sun was just peeking over the eastern mountains, casting long shadows across the yard. You don't have to do this, she said, leaning against the fence. Silverdale is still looking for a deputy. You could be there instead of facing weeks on the trail. Adam tightened the cinch before turning to her. I know where I need to be, Willow. Something in his eyes made her heart beat faster. She tried to keep her growing feelings for him in check, knowing he would leave eventually. Everyone did. But in that moment, looking at him in the early morning light, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. Why? She asked softly. Why are you doing all this for me? Adam stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Because in all my years of wandering, I've never met anyone like you. Because you fight for what's yours with everything you have. Because, he hesitated, then reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. Because I think I'm falling in love with you, Willow Foster. The words hung between them, as fragile and precious as spun glass. Willow felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough, he replied. I know you're brave and stubborn and kinder than you let on. I know you talk to your horse when you think no one's listening. I know you're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep. Willow's heart hammered in her chest. She'd never expected to find love here, in the midst of fighting for her survival. Yet somehow, this man had walked into her barn with his rifle raised and straight into her heart. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of the cattle drive or losing the ranch. I'm scared of this, of feeling something for someone who might leave." Adam's hand cupped her cheek. "I'm not going anywhere, Willow, not unless you want me to." She searched his eyes and found nothing but sincerity. Slowly, she reached up and placed her hand over his. "I don't want you to go," she whispered. He leaned down, and their lips met in a kiss that promised more than words ever could. Willow's arms slid around his neck as she surrendered to feelings she'd been fighting since the moment he stepped into her barn. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "We should go," he said reluctantly. "The drive won't wait," Willow nodded, though she was reluctant to step out of his embrace. "We'll talk more on the trail," she promised. The cattle drive was even more grueling than Willow had anticipated. Days of dust and heat, crossing rivers and navigating treacherous terrain. Nights spent in exhausted slumber, too tired to do more than exchange a few words before sleep claimed them. But there were moments of beauty too, sunset painting the prairie in gold and crimson, nights so clear the stars seemed close enough to touch. And through it all, Adam was by her side, his steady presence a comfort she hadn't known she needed. A week into the drive, disaster struck. A sudden thunderstorm spooked the herd, causing a stampede. In the chaos, one of the drovers was thrown from his horse and trampled. By the time they got the cattle under control, the man was badly injured, his leg crushed. "He needs a doctor," Willow said, kneeling beside the injured man. "There's a settlement about 10 miles east of here." "I'll take him," one of the other drovers volunteered. Adam shook his head. "We can't spare anyone. I'll go." "No," Willow said firmly. "We need you here. I'll take him." After a heated discussion, it was decided that Willow would escort the injured man to the settlement while Adam and the remaining drovers continued with the herd. They couldn't afford to delay. Every day was precious if they were to reach Cheyenne in time. "Be careful," Adam said as he helped lift the injured man onto Willow's spare horse. "Follow the creek east. You should reach the settlement by nightfall." Willow nodded, trying to ignore the fear gnawing at her. They'd heard rumors of Sioux warriors in the area, displaced and angry after being forced onto reservations. "I'll catch up to you in 2 days," she promised. "Keep the herd moving." Adam caught her hand before she could mount up. "Take this," he said, pressing a folded piece of paper into her palm. "Read it when you're alone." Curious, Willow tucked it into her pocket, then leaned down from her saddle to steal a quick kiss. "I'll be back before you know it." But things rarely went as planned on the frontier. Willow delivered the injured drover to the settlement's doctor, but a violent storm washed out the creek crossing, making it impossible for her to rejoin the cattle drive immediately. By the time she found a safe place to cross, she was 3 days behind schedule. Alone on the prairie, Willow pushed her horse hard, desperate to catch up. At night, she camped in sheltered spots, keeping her fire small to avoid attracting unwanted attention. It was during one of these solitary evenings that she remembered Adam's note. Sitting by her tiny fire, she unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The handwriting was neat and precise, so like the man himself. "Willow," it began, "if you're reading this, we're apart, and I find that harder than I expected. I've spent most of my life alone, moving from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. But these past weeks with you have shown me what I've been missing. You've given me a glimpse of a life I never thought possible, a life with purpose, with connection, with love. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. Whether we save your ranch or not, I'm asking you to consider a future where we build something together. I love you, Willow Foster. I think I have since the moment I saw you standing defiant in that barn, ready to take on the world alone. You don't have to be alone anymore. Neither do I." Adam tears blurred Willow's vision as she read the words again. She hadn't realized until that moment how desperately she'd needed to hear them to know that the connection she felt with Adam wasn't one-sided, that he saw a future with her, just as she'd begun to imagine one with him. Carefully folding the letter, she tucked it close to her heart and gazed up at the stars, feeling both more alone and less alone than she ever had before. The next day, she spotted buzzards circling in the distance. Something was wrong. Approaching cautiously, Willow discovered the remains of a camp, the cattle drive's camp. Signs of a struggle were everywhere, but the herd and the men were gone. Fear clutched at her heart as she dismounted to examine the site. Boot prints and moccasin tracks told a story she didn't want to read. The cattle drive had been attacked, either by bandits or native warriors. Among the scattered belongings, Willow found Adam's hat, dusty but unmistakable. She clutched it to her chest, fighting panic. Where was he? Where were the others? Had they been killed or taken prisoner? Following the tracks, Willow discovered that the herd had been driven north, away from the trail to Cheyenne. Without hesitation, she mounted her horse and set off in pursuit. Her ranch, the loan, the bank, none of it mattered now. All that mattered was finding Adam. For 2 days, she tracked the stolen herd across increasingly rugged terrain. The trail led into the foothills, where pine forests offered cover for those who didn't want to be found. Willow moved cautiously, aware that she was alone and vulnerable. As dusk fell on the second day, she spotted smoke rising from a hidden valley. Tethering her horse out of sight, she crept forward on foot, her father's revolver in hand. From the ridge overlooking the valley, she could see her cattle corralled below. Near a small creek, a camp had been established, not a native camp as she'd feared, but the hideout of what appeared to be a gang of outlaws, and there, tied to a tree at the edge of the camp, was Adam. Even from a distance, Willow could see that he'd been beaten. The other drovers were nowhere in sight. Rage and fear warred within her as she watched the camp. There were at least 8 men, all armed. She couldn't hope to overpower them, but she couldn't leave Adam either. As night fell, Willow formulated a plan. She waited until most of the outlaws had retired to their bedrolls, leaving only 2 men on watch. Then, moving silently through the darkness, she approached the camp from downwind, where the horses were picketed. The first part of her plan was the riskiest. She needed a distraction. Removing her bandana, she set it alight with a match, then tied it to a stick and threw it into the dry underbrush at the far side of the camp. Within moments, flames began to lick upward. Shouts of alarm erupted from the camp as the outlaws scrambled to contain the fire. In the confusion, Willow darted toward Adam. He looked up in shock as she appeared beside him, knife in hand to cut his bonds. "Willow," he whispered hoarsely. "What are you doing here?" "Rescuing you," she replied, sawing through the ropes. "Can you walk?" "I think so," he said, wincing as circulation returned to his limbs. "The others later," Willow cut him off. "We need to move now." Supporting each other, they staggered toward the horse corral. The fire was spreading, creating the perfect cover for their escape. Willow quickly saddled 2 horses while Adam, despite his injuries, managed to open the cattle pen. The frightened animals stampeded through the camp, adding to the chaos as Willow and Adam mounted up and rode hard into the night, driving a portion of the herd before them. They didn't stop until dawn, when both they and the horses were near collapse. Finding a sheltered ravine with a small spring, they made camp. Adam sank to the ground, his face pale with exhaustion and pain. Willow knelt beside him, gently examining his injuries. A cut above his eye, bruised ribs, rope burns on his wrists, but nothing that wouldn't heal. "You're the most foolish, brave woman I've ever known," he said, wincing as she cleaned the cut on his forehead. "You could have been killed coming after me like that." "As if I would do anything else," she replied, her voice catching. "What happened to the others?" Adam's expression darkened. "Jasper and Taylor were killed in the attack. Ben and Mac Gregor managed to escape. I stayed behind to slow them down, give the others a chance." Willow closed her eyes briefly, mourning the lost men. "And the cattle? Most were taken. What we have here is maybe a quarter of the herd." Adam caught her hand. "I'm sorry, Willow. I know what this means for the ranch." She shook her head. "That doesn't matter right now." "It does," he insisted. "I promise to help you save your home." "Home isn't just a place, Adam," Willow said softly. "I realized that while we were apart. Home is where you feel safe, where you belong. When I found your hat and thought I might have lost you." She couldn't continue, tears threatening to spill. Adam reached up to cup her face. "You read my letter," she nodded. "Every word, and my answer is yes. Yes. Yes to a future together. Yes to building something new. Yes to loving you, Adam Yates." He pulled her down to him, his kiss fierce despite his weakened state. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you, Willow Foster. We'll figure this out together." They rested for a day, allowing Adam to regain some strength. Then, gathering the remaining cattle, they continued toward Cheyenne. It was a far smaller herd than they'd started with, but Willow refused to give up hope. In Cheyenne, they sold the cattle for the best price they could get, not enough to pay off the loan, but enough to make a substantial payment. With their funds secured in a bank draft, they boarded a train back to Prairie Junction, arriving with just 3 days left before the deadline. As they rode toward Willow's ranch, Adam suddenly reined in his horse. "What is it?" Willow asked, concerned by his expression. "I've been thinking about Walsh," Adam said slowly. "Something didn't add up about how quickly he knew about your loan being called in, and the new bank manager arriving right after your father died." Understanding dawned on Willow's face. "You think they're working together?" "I think it's worth looking into before we hand over our money," Adam replied. The next morning found them in the office of the county sheriff, presenting their suspicions. The sheriff, a grizzled veteran of the frontier, listened carefully. "Walsh has been trouble for years," he admitted. "But proving bank fraud won't be easy. We don't need to prove it in court," Adam said. "We just need enough evidence to confront Phillips and make him back off." The sheriff scratched his beard. "I might be able to help with that. Phillips has been spending money freely since he arrived, more than his salary would allow. Been bragging about a big deal coming through." Armed with the sheriff's support, they confronted Phillips at the bank. Faced with the threat of investigation, the banker crumbled, admitting that Walsh had paid him to call in the Foster loan. "Walsh wanted the land," Phillips confessed. "Said there was something valuable on it. I don't know what." Willow and Adam exchanged a glance. "Water," Willow said suddenly. "The eastern section of our property has natural springs that never run dry, even in the worst droughts." With Phillips's signed confession in hand, they confronted Walsh at his ranch. The man's face drained of color when the sheriff presented the evidence. "You have a choice," the sheriff told him. "Face charges for fraud and attempted theft, or sign this agreement leaving the Foster ranch alone permanently." Walsh signed, his hand shaking with suppressed rage. As they rode back to Willow's ranch, relief and triumph buoyed their spirits. The loan was extended with fair terms, the land was safe, and Walsh would no longer be a threat. "I can't believe it's over," Willow said as they crested the hill overlooking her property. In the late afternoon sun, the ranch looked peaceful, the buildings solid and welcoming. Adam reached over to take her hand. "Not over," he said. "Just beginning." 2 weeks later, on a perfect autumn day, Willow Foster became Willow Yates in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Old Ben gave her away, and the few neighbors they'd invited cheered as Adam kissed his bride beneath an arch of wildflowers. That evening, as they stood on the porch of the cabin that was now their home, Adam wrapped his arms around Willow from behind, both of them gazing out at the land that had brought them together. "Do you remember the first time we stood here?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "You asked me why I was still here." Willow leaned back against his chest, smiling at the memory. "And now you're never leaving." "Never," he agreed, turning her in his arms to face him. "You know, when I walked into that barn with my rifle raised, I was just passing through, tracking a fugitive. I never expected to find the rest of my life waiting for me. And I never expected an outlaw confrontation to lead to this," Willow replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Willow thought about the journey that had brought them here, the fear and loss, the courage and determination, and most of all, the love that had grown between them against all odds. "What are you thinking?" Adam asked, catching a wistful expression on her face. Willow smiled up at him, her heart full. "I'm thinking that home isn't just a place after all, it's a person, and I'm home." Adam's arms tightened around her. "So am I, Willow, so am I." Together they stood on the threshold of their future, the wild frontier stretching before them, challenging and beautiful, and theirs to face no longer alone, but side by side, as it was meant to be.